Getting your attention.
Okay, so some thoughts related to because so often what we do is we do our sermon, and in the middle of our sermon, the Spirit is moving and working in somebody's life, and we finish our sermon, we say, Amen, and our hymn of the day is, and we zip right past what the Holy Spirit's been doing in their heart and their life for the last 8, 10, 12, 30 minutes, however long you preach in your particular context, but we just kind of zoom right past it without pausing to give people the opportunity to engage. So this kind of thinking about after your prayers doing something like this, let's talk about that. Your thoughts?
So I'm curious, after you said that, did you give them a few minutes to talk or reflect or just silence? Yeah, 'cause if I would hear that, I would need to also then process that.
Let me kind of answer that. I'm not formulaic in how I do that. It just depends on what that context might be, that situation might be. At Christmas, I took my time with this because we know on Christmas Eve there are people who aren't as engaged as others would be, and so I took my time and I say Amen. I say through Christ Jesus our Lord, we pray Amen. And then, just, you can take time, you can say, I celebrate with you if you prayed that prayer, if it's your first time to really ever engage faith in a way, I celebrate with you, and I'm celebrating that that you're part of the story. So it just, I don't have a formula to that. Don?
Yeah, I love your response, by the way, the flexibility, and I love that. I just hope I'm open to the Spirit enough to be that flexible. But I've gotten into where I literally, the service stops, if you will. 3, 4, about 3 minutes of silence is all I think people can stand. But we don't just jump into the hymn. I want them to sit with, if nothing else, that final word, that final sentence that I have, which is hopefully a very powerful sentence. It's interesting because you always said this is how my sermon ended, which I think that's where it's at. So I just have a time of silence, and the pianist, we have a pianist, not an organist, and he's not in back, he's right in front of me. He does not start the next hymn until I point my finger at him. And because I want to be able to determine how long. And I don't know how long. I literally don't know how long.
Let me just piggyback a bit on what you just said about the sermon and the ending of it. I think one of the places pastors fail in our preaching most often, and I've done teaching on preaching too, is we don't figure out before we go in how to clearly land the plane and land it well. That the conclusion, you got to have something that grabs them in the front, but you got to land that plane well. The conclusion needs to be like the zinger in the whole sermon. Okay, anybody else?
Just really quickly, a couple of weeks ago I did something that I had not done before. I took the theme of my sermon and I made it into like 2 lines at the invitation to come to the altar. So instead of saying, come for all is ready, the gifts of God for the people of God, or one of our formula pieces, I made a reference to the sermon, as you come to the altar, take this time to. And I had unexpected response from that. I've given that some more thought. So
Anybody else? Is it Ramon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ramon. I serve
All due respect.
I serve a congregation that we have English speaking, and then we have a Spanish worship. And in the English speaking, I get the throughout the sermon, and so I'm not like, I don't feel like free to go a little bit longer or let the Spirit move me. And but in the Spanish, a lot of times instead of going into the hymn or the song right after, that's where I do the prayers of intercession. That's where I just I ignore the ones that we have every Sunday, and I just open it. And usually the congregation give me cards with prayer requests, and it's really nice to be able to do that. I've tried a couple times to do it in the first service, and it just does not flow, because I'll be going like half hour after that. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, us Caucasian people, we missed out on so much culturally. We really did. Anybody else? Matt?
Just similar to that, I've been in contexts before where you move straight from the proclamation into communion.
Yeah.
Into the meal. Is another neat way to offer that.
So move straight from the proclamation into communion. It was interesting, in the last couple of weeks, Jay Agnes and I developing a new friendship, we were having a conversation about all of these things. Jay was intelligent enough to make a connection that I hadn't made, but here was his connection. He said, are those kind of things really so different than our confession and absolution? And I went back and I looked, and are those prayers really so different than this? That we say Sunday after Sunday, and like some of you have talked about, thinking about other ways to help people, and to serve them is a big part of that. So if you take the sense of that and kind of reframe it, it's basically like those prayers that I invited people to pray. Well, let me keep going for a few minutes, and so what we said was to create a preferred future, we have to develop a language of mission and conversion, and then I would also say we have to begin to experiment more in our churches. And this can be a frightening thing. What keeps you from experimenting more in your church? Pushback? Pushback from who? Pushback from parishioners. Okay, what else?
Dead response.
Dead response.
Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. Any other things?
Time. It takes a lot more energy and time to do something different. It's far easier sometimes to continue to do the same thing.
Takes a lot more time and energy to do that. I think there are a couple of things that in a general way, in a more corporate way, keep most of us who are pastors from experimenting. Two key barriers to that. Did I skip a slide or two? Did I hit buttons? Okay, I don't know where those... I got my slides out of order, it looks like. Let me just give them to you, and you may see them in a minute. One of those two key barriers that keep us from experimenting anymore is fear of failure. We don't want to fail, because we think if something doesn't work, we have failed. And that fear of failure is driven by church councils and money and risks. I happen to think the Apostle Paul had a great theology of risk. When you read how Paul did his ministry. But here's something I want to encourage you to keep in mind. You don't know if it's going to work before you try it. You never know if it's going to work before you try it. And if you try something and it doesn't work, I would encourage you to begin to shift your thinking that is not failure, that is actually success. Because if you keep thinking about it, you've got this idea, you're afraid to try it, you might fail at it. If you try it and it doesn't work, now it's a success because you know you can stop thinking about that idea.
Or it can give you new data.
Or it can give you new data. But just because it doesn't work, it doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means, you tried something and it didn't work. I think a key word for people in our churches is if we use the word pilot. As pastors, we sometimes think we've got this vision, this idea, we're going to jump into it, we're going to change it, we're going to start doing this. The only people who like change are cashiers and babies with wet diapers. Most people don't like change. So if you don't use the language of change, but you use the language of pilot, I want us to try something and just see if it works or not. And most people are okay with you piloting something, giving it a try, seeing if that happens to work or not. So begin to use that kind of language. We've done this quite a bit at Hope. In Christmas of 2018, I've got to find. Let me fix this for just a second. And then I'll go back here in just a moment. I added a couple of slides last night and didn't double check them. One of those is that fear of failure, that of what that might look like. Christmas of 2018, we decided at Hope to try something new, and not just to have Christmas Eve services, but to make it a festival. That we want to begin to attract families. And so we didn't just have Christmas Eve services, we had Christmas Eve services and a family festival, all during Christmas Eve services. And our first service was at 3, so we started everything at about 3:30, it finished up at 7. But we had a petting zoo and train rides and photos of Santa and the Grinch and a hot chocolate bar and Santa's sleigh and snow was happening. And people came because of the festival and stayed for the service. Derek, how much did our attendance increase that year over the previous year? A lot. If I remember right, it was somewhere in the range of around 500 people, more that Christmas than before. But they came for that. Again, hear me. The numbers are just to give perspective, not to talk about the numbers themselves. But we all believe in numbers because we count our offering. So numbers do matter. So we believe in those. And some of you right now are probably think, yeah, that's great. You hope you got the money to do that. You don't have to do this, but do something. Try something a little more than what we didn't have the money in our budget for this. It was an idea that came later in the year. And so what we did, we just kind of all said, okay, who can we all go talk to see if they'll help us try this? Because people in your church are waiting to help you. People in your church want you to get better at what you're doing. And so often it's just asking that question, we want to try this thing with a family festival, but we don't really have the budget. Would you be willing to give $500 toward helping do this? And within a week's time, because we just had personal conversations, some people said yes, some said no, some said, I'll give you more than that, some said, I can't give you what you asked for, but I'll give you a little. We had raised the money to be able to do this. And so, and invite people into the journey with you to try some things new. Now, everything that we have tried, of course, this one worked, but another one we decided we would do is when we were going to do those Christmas Eve services, that we were going to advertise on sports talk radio. One of my pet peeve is when churches advertise on Christian radio. You're not going to reach anybody new. Who listens to Christian radio? I don't even listen to Christian radio. I don't like Christian radio. You can go out and check my car right now. I've got Sirius XM, the highway hits from the country top. Go listen. I do not have a Christian radio button on my Sirius XM. I don't. That's very Lutheran? Good. I will become a good Lutheran before I die. And so I don't. But we decided to try it. And we ran a commercial on the talk radio. And so I want you to hear. I'm going to try to play this commercial and see if you can hear it.
you heard the story of the undocumented, migrant, underage, unwed, pregnant mother who gave birth on Christmas? It's a story of hope for all of us, regardless of who you are or how you see yourself. It's a story of how much you're loved exactly like you are. It's a story about turnarounds in life. On Christmas Eve at Hope Lutheran Church in Palm Desert, that's the story we're excited to tell at 3, 4:30, 5:30, and 7 p.m. Part of that story is about living life fully. So we'll have a free petting zoo, train rides, snowfall, and more for great family memories. Get the details at hopepd.org.
That was our Christmas commercial. Have you heard the story of the migrant, undocumented, unwed, pregnant? I mean, that grabs, and because that's when it was really hot in the news, grabbed some attention. Great plan, right? Yeah, no, it wasn't. We had some methodology, because anytime I think that you use marketing or you're reaching out, you need to have some way to measure that, and we had a tool we used to measure that when we asked people who came to Christmas Eve how they heard about the services. You want to know how many of them said they heard it on sports talk radio?
No.
0. We didn't get any of those responses. But we still believe it might have some viability. And so we're going to try it again. When, Derek?
March Madness.
During March Madness. And try it again. And here's the thing. If we do it a couple of times and there's not a response to that, then we know that doesn't work. We don't get the kind of return we want to have on that.
Well, when you do an experiment, it doesn't mean it's right the first time. You can tweak it and tweak it and tweak it. But people think, oh, it's either yes or no, it either worked or didn't. But that's not how scientists work.
Right, exactly. And I think our tweak this time needs to be, if we're doing commercials, that Pastor Derek does them instead of me, because he's a much more likable person. And everybody in our town loves him. Well, so we're afraid of the fear of failure. But now let me find the other thing that I think that keeps us. Let me show you one more thing right here. This year we wanted to try something new, and we had a concert, not at Christmas Eve, but leading up to Christmas Eve, a couple weeks before Christmas Eve. It was a Frank Sinatra impersonator that we ended up finding we had a connection with, who came and did that, and the guy who runs sound for our modern services is in the Harry James Band, and we put it together. We had this show, and we sold it out. We sold it out, but the best part was I had a young adult in our services who came to me before, and she said, I can't tell you how happy I am tonight. This is the first time my father has ever gone into a church building with me.
Wow.
And she's invited him. He wouldn't go for a service, but he would come here to this Frank Sinatra concert where we could begin to have some exposure. And it totally paid for itself. It made money, all those kinds of things. So the two key barriers, one is the fear of failure. The other is confusing decision-making and problem-solving. And this one is a huge one for me, that we confuse decision-making and problem-solving. Thank you. See, most people problem-solve to try to get to their decision. And any decision is going to have so many problems it can stop us from making the decision. The way healthy, effective churches, as I have worked with them, and I've spent a lot of time working with a lot of churches across North America. They never confuse decision-making and problem-solving. They make the decision of what they believe God wants them to do, and then they solve the problems to get that decision done. So I want to encourage you to stop confusing decision-making and problem-solving. Start with the decision, and then solve the problems to get there. Pastor Derek did this brilliantly almost 4 years ago now, when we were going to start our modern service. You know, God had put in Derek's heart that we needed another style service. We have wonderful traditional services, but we needed another style service. Derek had that decision that he knew what God had put on his heart, and then he started solving the problems of how to get there and work through that. And that's how effective leaders always lead. You make the decisions, and then you problem solve to get to those. Last January, we started this modern service. Last January, we knew we need to go to 2 modern services. And the modern service was we had traditional services at 8 and 9:30 on Sunday mornings. Our modern service was at 11. We knew the only other time slot to have another modern service was at 9:30. Our biggest traditional service is at 9:30. Now we're going to add another service all on the same property at the same time. And what in the world is going to happen with parking? And I come from a background where people have to walk 5 minutes from where they park to get to the sanctuary. It's not a big deal. When I was at one previous church, from the furthest parking spot into the sanctuary was almost a 15-minute walk, and that parking spot was filled every week. So people will do it, we just have to train them. But we know in our current culture, people don't want to walk. They don't want to walk a minute and a half. We have spots that are open a minute and a half, and they don't want to walk from there. So what did we do? We made the decision, we're going to add the 9:30 modern service. It's going to create a parking nightmare. People aren't going to want to walk. So how do we solve that problem? We rent 2 6-passenger golf carts and we run them around the street picking people up and bringing them in. And they're loving it. And it gives the people driving those carts opportunities to connect with people and have conversations on the way in. And it was so positive last year. I was kind of saying, oh, maybe we shouldn't do it this year, though. I didn't have the money, the whole thing. Derek said, order the golf carts. And so we ordered the golf carts. And again, we started them again last week. We do it only during season. That's when we need to do it. And problem solved. But we made the decision, then we solved the problem. So I want to encourage you to do that. So a couple more things, and then to create a preferred future, we need to develop a language of mission and conversion. We need to experiment. And then, this is a big one, I believe we need to shift our focus. There are 2 places we can look. We can either look forward or we can look backward in our lives. I want you to know God designed all of us for the future. Our bodies are literally made for the future. We have 2 eyes that face forward, ears that hear better in front of us than behind us. Our feet point forward, our arms reach forward, our hands function forward. God built us to move outward and forward and into the future. There's only one part of your body that faces backward. And we never want to be that. So God made us to look out. And so often we've been looking we haven't been looking out, we've been looking in. And so many of our churches are very inwardly focused church programs and a view and a focus just to keep the people happy inside. And eventually all those people we're keeping happy inside, they're going to die. It's inevitable. I've done the statistical work. 100% of us are going to die someday. And so we need to shift our focus, not just from inside, but to also looking outward. And just a couple of, do you really care about people who aren't aware of God and God's grace, discovering that in their lives? Do you really want new people to come to your church? Then you have to shift your focus from where it is now on the inside and everything that's happening to the outside and how they can be engaged with the gospel in an effective and powerful way. Are you reaching the next generation for Jesus? If you would let me evaluate your budget, I could tell you whether you're reaching the next generation for Jesus or not. And I've had pastors tell me, well, we don't need that much in our budget for kids ministry or for our high school because we don't have that many. I'm going to make you a promise. If you don't put it in your budget, you'll never have many. Because it follows what we do for them. We began to make that shift 3.5 years ago at Hope. Derek, what's our kids' Sunday school like now? Just to put things in the learning curve of the perspective. Like 4 years ago, how many kids would we have in Sunday school?
5.
We'd have 5. Now how many do we have in Sunday school?
We're averaging 110.
Now, and there's one reason. We decided kids matter to Jesus. And we hired another staff person, we began to throw money, we shifted monies in the budget to put the emphasis there. Jesus said it, this is not me. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He didn't say where your money is, there your treasure, where your heart is, there for you. Show you, look at where you're spending your money, and that's really where your heart is. We'll all say we care about kids, but are we spending money to care about kids? We're spending more money on lawn care than we do on kids ministry. Figure that out. So So one final thing, and then I'm gonna wrap up. To create a preferred future, we need to experiment, and we need to shift focus. And then this is one that I'm gonna leave us with. We need to become evangelistically intentional. Evangelistically intentional. Who is your audience? Who are you speaking to? There are two major holidays a year that are great for churches. What are they? They're Christmas and Easter. We're on the horizon of one of those that are coming. You need to leverage as much as you can to lean into those. Because when we lean into those holidays, all of the people who come on Christmas and Easter aren't coming back. But if you get a few of them to come back over the course of the next year, then your church begins to grow. They begin to discover the grace of Jesus. Their lives begin to change because of that. Now, you're probably going to have some kind of an invitation that you'll give people, or a little postcard, or something that you're going to do to invite people to come to your Easter services this year. What kind of things will you put on those cards? If you're going to invite people to come to your church, what kind of things are you going to put on them? You're going to put the times, location, website, a hook. What kind of hook?
You put me on the spot.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. But so special events. I'm sorry? Food. Childcare. And then we usually put things like, celebrate Easter with us. He is alive. Those kinds of things that we'll put on there. Let me give you some encouragement. You don't have to try to get church people to come to church on Easter. If they have any church background, they're showing up. Anyway, we, on our focus and becoming evangelistically intentional, are focusing on trying to get people who have no church background, who are totally disconnected from church, to come to church on the day that they're most likely to come, either there on Christmas Eve each year. So I'm just going to show you a couple of quick examples. Easter of 2018, this was our theme we have these big banners outside of our church, and this was our theme.
Aww.
See, that's your hook.
That's the hook. It doesn't say celebrate Easter. God loves his peeps. Easter, sunrise, traditional, modern services. And they could drive down the street and know the opportunities that they have. We got so much positive feedback on this. And then you take that same theme, we developed these little business-sized invitation cards. God loves his peeps on the front. Everywhere you go, we're encouraging people to carry these. Lay them on your table when you leave Starbucks. When you go out to eat, leave it with your tip. Leave one for your server. But we tell people, if you're a cheap Christian, don't leave it. We don't want our church's name on it. If you're going to leave this, you got to leave a really good tip. So do that. And so it's trying to get people at least to notice, and something is different than that. So you say, yeah, that costs a lot of money. You can have 1,000 full-color, business-sized, two-sided card made like that and delivered to you for $20. I've found over my years of pastoring, most of our people invite people to come if we give them a tool to use. So be thinking about what tool you're going to use. I'll tell you who our printer is. They're actually in Buena Park. That we really do like. The great service and great work. Well, then 2019 we had to come up with something else. And so this was our Easter theme for 2019.
Aww.
Get your tail in church this Easter. And then just the service, that was the banner. And then we did the same kind of thing. We made these little cards, get your tail in church this Easter. And, people chuckle at that, even people that maybe they were in church as a kid, but then, that's funny, that's cute. And then on the back, the name of the church and the service times. So I hope we can encourage you to experiment some. It doesn't take a lot of money to do some experimentation and try things and give your people tools. Okay, I'm going to see if you have any quick questions, and if not, I'm going to hand it off and let Dr. Kärkkäinen get started.
You know what we can do? We have 15 minutes time. Let's have a Q&A and until lunch, and then I will pick it up.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, we can be flexible.
There's the voice of a professor. So let's do Q&A. Let's do some Q&A for the next 15 or so minutes, and 10 minutes, okay, next Q&A for 10 minutes, and if you don't have that, then we'll wrap that up, okay?
At that Easter service, at that Easter service where you had guests come, what did you do to make those guests feel welcome at the service when they came on Easter? What did you do different, or what did you do especially on Easter to build on that connection?
Okay. What do we do to build on that? One, if they're going to get there, we want to try to give them a reason to come back. And so we want to let them know about children's programming, activities we have going on, special events, guest speakers that are going, anything that you can do to give them a reason to come back. We always try to amp up our ushers and our greeters so that we really help people, because it feels strange. I would encourage us on Easter to give particular attention to thinking through your service for people who don't have a church background. I still remember the first time I ever growing up as a Protestant, the first time I ever attended a Catholic Mass. Any of you ever have that experience? I was miserable. I didn't know when to stand up. I didn't know when to sit down. I didn't know if I was supposed to push the little footstool down or not. That's what I thought it was, to prop your feet. And then you've got this whole thing, and then I got to go to this book, and I got to go to this book, and I got to go to this reading, and I got to go. It's like, my goodness, all I wanted to do was get out. And I still remember they had the little offering basket sitting beside the end of the pew, and we were supposed to pick that up and pass it down the pew. I didn't know that. And so the offering's happening. I'm just waiting for an usher to come and hand me the basket. Look up and I see the priest coming down the aisle. He grabs the basket, pats me on the shoulder like, you poor idiot, and hands me the basket. And so then I pass it down the aisle. I would say on Easter, over-communicate everything. Assume that everybody in there has no idea what you're doing at all. You know, it's like talking about communion and all, or what's it really mean that you're welcome to come to communion? You know, and because, every church I know, I drive past churches that their signs out front say all are welcome. Heck no, all aren't welcome. I got kicked out of one that used to say that, you know. But what do we mean by that when we say you're welcome? You know, this is the Lord's table to come. So, and the process, I would over-communicate everything at Easter. Okay?
I was just wondering what advice or where you can go in teaching your congregation this. I think this is all great advice for us as leaders, and I'm wondering, how do you create that culture? What things have you done to create that culture within the people of your church so that they're following along with this?
Yeah. I would say in our structure, part of it is to engage. I would start first with the church council. Because if you don't have your council buy-in, you're going to be fighting uphill the whole time. As a pastor, you've got to be willing to take risks with your council. To say, you know, we need to begin to take a look at some things that we're doing. Do we like the results we're getting right now? No, we don't. Well, then let's think together about that. Let me tell you about a really good TED Talk to watch. It's by Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. It's called The Golden Circle. If you've never watched that, watch Simon Sinek, The Golden Circle. Because he talks about how we move and operate in most successful organizations, either from why to how to what, or what to how to why. Successful organizations always start with why. But as churches, so often we do what? You know, we do what? And so we have a bunch of activities and we stay busy, but our why gets totally lost in it. So watch that through the lens of being a pastor of a church. Derek?
And I'd also say create strong values and be able to well articulate those values. You know, it's like part of our values are lost people matter to God, so they matter to us. And we worship God, not traditions. Jesus is life, the rest is just details. And it's the more you can share those values and create that culture, then more people understand what you're trying to do.
And I'd like to do that too. As I've visited a lot of your churches, the other thing is, love your own people well enough so that they'll follow you. You know,
Yes.
If you get out too far ahead of them and they feel like they aren't cared for at all, it's never going to work. But if you love your people and help them lift their eyes to those outsiders, like Derek said, then that's where I think it comes together.
It comes it's like the old saying, the one who thinks they are leading but looks back and no one is following is only out for a walk. You know, that we
really are. You've got to take them with you. And that takes, especially if you begin to do some transitional things, transition takes intention and time. You have to stay intentional about it, and you have to take time about that. You know, because sometimes, here's what happens. Let's say this is where you are today, and there's something, your evangelistic intention, you want to be here, and you begin to move toward that, and about here you get pushback and bump. I encourage you as a pastor, take a breath, take a step back, but don't just take a step back. This is where you wanted to be. When you take your step back, then set your goal out here. So the next time you hit resistance, you're going to be past where you originally wanted to be anyway. Do you get what I'm saying?
Can you give an example of that?
Let me think of one. Let's say you want to change something in the order of your liturgy. And just, you know, always trying to talk with some people, some key influencers in your church before you make changes, whether it's your council or not. Take them along with you. I'm thinking about something. I want to try something. Can you give me your input on this? I'm thinking about moving confession to after the sermon. What would that do to you? What do you think it's worth a try? And just see if that works for us or doesn't work. And you try it, and maybe it works, and then you get a lot of bump up. Then move it somewhere else. Maybe don't go back to where you were. Move it to somewhere else. But then set it, this goal that I'm going to go back to here at this point. Something like that kind of thing.
Okay, here.
Okay.
Yeah. In my years of experience, the hardest part to fill in the leadership in the church is evangelism. That's what I have found, that nobody wants to participate in that. We have someone that took the risk this year. What are some suggestions to pass on to this new person, not only on this committee, but also, it hasn't not been done in a long time, and I think that's our down in the churches, that it takes a lot of work, and what can we do in building that team?
I'll give you one answer to that, but I think Veli-Matti is going to, in his presentation, is going to address some of the hurdles we have in that. But one is to find one or two people who have that heart and then begin to do. Because what we have is, the problem I think we have on evangelism is because of this horrible image that has been created in Western culture, that it means you've got to go knock on doors, and you got to present 4 spiritual laws, you got to try to get them saved while this. And they make this connection that that's what evangelism is. I want to recommend a book that I really like to you. And you're not going to align with everything with the theology in it, but I think every book we read, we have to read like a cow eats hay. A cow eats hay, takes its mouth, pulls it around and around and around, spits the briars out, and keeps what's good out of it. So we read books that way. It's called The Unexpected Adventure, beginning to have everyday conversations with people about everyday spiritual conversations with people about Jesus, something like that. But it's The Unexpected Adventure by Lee Strobel and Mark Middleburg. I've done some work with both of those guys, and they're amazing. Probably no 2 people in America that are more committed to evangelism. But they just write about having conversations out of life and how it happens, and that's what evangelism is, and then taking people on a spiritual journey with them.
Here comes the last one.
Okay, here comes the last one, the FD.
It's going to be really good.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. Thank you so much for all of this wonderful encouragement and information and ideas. And now here comes the scold. I get to travel. I am so blessed to get to travel to all of your churches, or at least most of them. And sometimes I'm a little bit forgetful, so early on Sunday morning, I'm on your website trying to find out what time I should be at your service so that I don't miss it. If your website and your Facebook page aren't up to date, get somebody in there to do it. And you will hear from me personally if I go on there and I can't see your service times and your address immediately, because I'm going to search for it. But the person who just thought they might want to go to church today isn't going to. They're going to give up. And I think that's something we can all do, is to keep that up to date. It doesn't have to be the most fancy website or the most fancy Facebook page. But if they can't find where you are and what time to be there, they're not coming. So I love the Easter and the Christmas things, and that's coming up. But you better have it on your website too.
That's a good one.
So thank you so
Good work.
much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Rachel, are you giving us lunch instructions?
When you're ready, yep.
Will you bless it for us while you're at it?
Nope, but I'll leave you all in song.
Okay, then we'll do that. Okay, come give us some instruction.
All right, is this on? Am I on? Do I have to?
Push the button until the light comes
Push
green.
the button, I got it. So now it is time for lunch. Thank you very much to our two presenters. They have been wonderful, and you still get more of them. I was getting ready to yell at Panera for messing up my lunch order, and then I went back and I looked to see what I ordered, and turns out that I will be yelling at me because I messed up the Panera order. So I tried to get some veggie sandwiches, and they did not bring me those. So for the vegetarians, there are some salads with no chicken on it. So I'm hopeful that that's okay. There are also some tuna salad sandwiches. So if we can be ecumenical with the Lutherans and the pescatarians together, maybe we can. Thank you.
I got it.
Thank you. Pescatarian. Anyway, okay. So the other thing with the gluten-free, the salads are gluten-free, except for the one with the croutons. So if you avoid the croutons, your salad should be gluten-free. I hope that is self-explanatory to you folks. Again, my apologies about the vegetarian sandwiches, but I hope that you can find something that's good. The cookies, which is my favorite part of Panera, I stole one already, are on this side near the drinks, and you'll see it's kind of set up that way. So the style I like to do is if you're the vegetarian gluten. Kate Lear just stole all of the cookies. Okay, you're fine. If you're vegetarian or gluten-free, it probably makes more sense to send you through the line first so that you can get your food before others steal your food. So feel free to do that when we're ready. I'll let you all kind of self-police yourselves for that. I think that's all you need to know, and if I can have someone give us a note and we can sing Be Present at Our Table, Lord, because I love that with all of you folks to sing that. Be present at our table, Lord. Be here and everywhere adored. These mercies bless and grant that we may strengthen for thy service be.
This works very well. 2 hours, so